My parents always favored my older brother, the golden child, and always took his side. When he failed his university entrance exam, they forced me into a school inferior to his. So I did this, which made my parents panic and rush to apologize to me. So, for perspective, I am a 20-year-old male with a younger brother, Jared, who has always been treated better by my parents. He's only 10 months younger than me, but my parents enrolled us in school together, so we've always competed. We've always been in the same grade, and I've always come out on top in every competition because I'm better than him at everything, academically or otherwise. I've had superior grades since the beginning and have always intended to attend Caltech to study data science. While my brother had always been more interested in biology and would boast about how he would grow up to be one of the pioneers of microbiology and accomplish great things, but he was largely just barking and not biting. Despite being the more academically oriented brother, my parents refused to pay for me to attend college. Around my junior year of high school, I was doing well and had a hunch I might get admitted into Caltech when the time came. So I got down with my parents and had a fair chat with them about it, and they assured me that they would cover the fees for me. It wouldn't even be difficult for them because my father had been running the business he inherited from his father since he was a child, and they had been endowed with wealth from the start, so it was no great thing for them. But I was really scared because both of my parents had to pay their own way through college. Despite his wealth, my father was required by my grandfather to labor and pay his dues before inheriting the firm, and I was concerned that he would try something similar with me. However, my parents constantly promised me that they had this, and that when the time came, they would ensure that I could attend college, of my dreams, without having to worry about tuition. Even until the last few days of my senior year when people had already begun applying to colleges, I was under the impression that if I was accepted to Caltech, they would make sure that everything was paid for, because they had promised and told me that they would take care of everything for the previous 4 years. However, when I finally received my acceptance letter from Caltech, they did a complete 180 and told me that they would not be paying for my college education because Jared had not been accepted into his preferred college, and now they wanted me to attend a mediocre college with him just so he wouldn't feel bad about himself. To be fair, he had been aiming for Cornell, which was foolish of him because his grades were clearly not up to par for a college like that, if I'm being honest. He had always been a fairly ordinary and mediocre student, which is not always a negative thing, but not even attempting to improve and setting such lofty goals is setting yourself up for failure, and that is exactly what had happened. So the day my parents informed me that he had been rejected by Cornell and would have to settle for anything else, they asked me to accompany him so that he did not feel like a failure. I didn't have to think twice about shutting it down. Regardless of what he had been through, I had been admitted into the college of my choosing, and the best I could do for him was express my sympathies, but I refused to give up on my hopes for him. I may have contemplated it if Jared had been nice to me at some time in his life, but we never really got along from the start. Our parents had made it a point to push us against one another, and despite my repeated attempts to befriend him, he always saw himself as superior to me. I'm not sure why, but he seemed to think he was better than me. On top of that, our parents constantly treated him as if he was superior to everyone else, which further reinforced his false ideas, and it got on my nerves. But I couldn't help it. And I used to argue with my parents about this a lot as a child, but they would always try to remind me that I was older than him, so I had to accept that this was the way it was. Instead of becoming envious, I occasionally complained to my maternal uncle about these things because he and I were close. But that was all I could do when my parents asked if I would be willing to do that, and I said no, and that's when they told me that if I did not agree to their terms, they would be forced to break their word and would not be paying for me to attend college. I wasn't prepared to make a compromise for my brother's pleasure. I was furious at this point, and we had a terrible fight that day because what they were doing was so wrong on so many levels. They had given me false optimism for years, which is why I didn't try to get any jobs or internships to supplement my income, and I hadn't even talked to anyone about student loans or anything, and it was going to be difficult. I knew it would be tough for me to work through college and pay for my own tuition. I was in a pretty bad situation. It was simply because my parents were too selfish to consider what would happen to me, and instead focused solely on Jared. Fighting with them, however, proved ineffective. I begged and pleaded with them, which was humiliating. Nonetheless, they did not reach an agreement. They were adamant about what they had stated, and they believed that I should abandon Caltech just because I should prioritize my brother's pleasure. I disagreed, and I attempted to explain to them that what they were asking of me was not a small sacrifice, but rather giving up on my future, something I could never bear. But they refused to budge, and I realized I was wasting my time talking to them and attempting to persuade them to see reason, when they had clearly stated their priorities from the start, and I had been a fool to ever trust them. So I packed up my clothes and books and left the house that evening. They did not try to stop me, so I arrived to my uncle's place in the evening and told him everything. As I indicated previously in my piece, he and I had always been close, and he was always compassionate. He constantly tried to persuade my mother, his older sister, to understand what I was going through and see things from my point of view, but it never worked. However, that day was the last straw for me, and I finally informed him that I couldn't live with my parents anymore, and I was counting on him to help me out. Somehow, I just wanted him to be a co-signer on my loan application, and then I'd figure out how to pay everything off, but I only needed his help for that. One item. I was in a panicky state when I arrived at his house, but he calmed me down, enabled me to vent about what was going on, and then informed me that he was going to take care of my tuition and that I didn't have to worry about it. I was overjoyed when he said that, because it meant I wouldn't have to worry about student loans or anything else, because he had promised me he'd take care of everything. And he really delivered, because I was able to attend college and accept my position on time, and he covered all of my expenses. He's a dentist who makes a nice living, but spending it on me, his nephew, rather than storing it for his future, was a very generous gesture, and I'll always be grateful to him for it. Anyway, I've been in college for a year and haven't communicated with my parents in that time because they didn't try to contact me either. I suppose they know what I'm up to. Since I've been posting updates on social media, and even though I've blocked them, I still have other family members, and from what I understand, they've been in contact with the rest of the family, except for my uncle, who cut off my parents as soon as he discovered what they had done to me. I didn't expect to hear from them anytime soon, but they decided to pay me a visit at college last week, which startled me because it was so sudden and unexpected. At first, I considered avoiding them, but out of curiosity, I decided to meet them and we went out for lunch. After lunch, they apologized for how things had turned out and expressed a desire to make things right with me. Everything seems dodgy, but I was prepared to give them a chance. They had not taken Jared with him, and when I inquired about him, they informed me that he had opted to take a gap year and would begin applying to universities again this year. When I asked about Jared, they tried to badmouth him in front of me, saying how disappointed they were in him, and how he was the true failure, which is why they wanted to make it up to me. And I was suspicious throughout the entire incident. And near the end of the evening, they confirmed my suspicions by informing me that they had come to see me for another reason. And since I appeared to be having a wonderful time, they decided to bring it up with me. They told me that they were in talks with a very large investor about a deal, and they were desperate to have them on board, because my parents had a catering business and were looking to expand into the more high-end market. And this guy would be ideal for that, because they could collaborate with his event management business and do more upper-class events for better money. They needed me because they had allegedly spoken with this individual several times and were still attempting to work things out. And a few days before our meeting, he said that his younger son was attempting to get into Caltech, and my parents had boasted about me getting there. And now he had requested my parents to bring me to a business party so he could introduce me to his son and perhaps give him some advice or pointers. My parents had agreed to it, but by doing so, they had put themselves in a terrible situation because they were not on good terms with me, and the true reason they came to see me that day was to make amends with me so that they could invite me to the party in a few days, which they feel will help them close the deal with this investor. My parents also wanted me to speak positively of them and perhaps improve their image a little. At a party. What was in it for me, you may ask? My parents informed me that they were aware that I had initially approached my uncle and requested for assistance, but that they were now prepared to cover the remainder of my costs and college tuition, as well as double the amount I required if I simply assisted them with this. So, in summary, I was getting double the asking price, with the only condition that I lie about how amazing my parents were as investors and attend a party with them. It didn't sound like a horrible offer, so I agreed. However, I had quite different purposes. 3 days ago, I eventually went to the party with my parents, and once we arrived, I did exactly what I had planned. I gave my parents a taste of their own medicine, after assuring them that I would do everything they had asked of me when they introduced me to their potential investor. I decided to be as direct as possible and tell him the whole situation. I began by thanking him for repairing the relationship between my parents and me, and when he looked perplexed, I decided to elaborate, telling him how my parents had finally reached out to me after a year of not speaking with me, simply because they wanted to get an investment from him and bring him on board. So, technically, I had him to thank for everything. I also told the rest of the story about how my parents had given me hope for 4 years, saying they would pay for my college expenses only to turn their backs on me at the last minute because my brother did not get into his dream college, and they wanted me to give up on my dreams so it would not hurt him. And then they shut me out of their lives because I chose to do what was right for me. After hearing everything, he and everyone else in the room were taken aback. Most importantly, my parents had turned crimson in the face and were trying not to look everyone in the eye. After that, I had very little to do. So I called a cab and returned to university, which was only a 45-minute drive away. It's been utterly hectic since my parents attempted to contact me, creating many social media accounts and using different phone numbers and email addresses simply because I blocked their initial ones. They blame me for destroying their agreement because their investor has ceased responding to them after what I told him at the party. But that is not what bothers me. I am only here because of what my uncle said. I told him about what I had done days ago, and I expected him to laugh with me because I had finally gotten back at my parents for what they had done to me a year ago. But he didn't find it funny at all, saying that it was very vindictive and mean of me to do something like that. And he thought I should have simply told my parents that I wasn't interested in assisting them and left it at that, rather than going out of their way to do something like this. And since then, every time we've spoken, he's been strange and cold to me, and I feel awful. So I apologized for informing my parents about a work function after agreeing to help them out. Update 1. So it's been 1 week since the party, and based on what I've read, everyone in the comments seems very divided on whether I did the right thing or not, which has only added to my confusion. I had been relying on this thread to help me make a decision, but I decided to just go with my emotions and contacted my uncle to discuss it. I didn't want to speak with him over the phone about something like this, so I asked if I could come over and we could talk in person, and he agreed. So I went to his place yesterday, and it was weird because we hadn't had a proper talk in the last week since what I told him. So when I arrived, things were really tight. But then I decided to break the ice and tell him that I didn't believe I needed to feel guilty or apologize to my parents for what had transpired. But as he was someone whose opinion I valued, I decided to talk things out with him and explain why I did what I did. He appeared attentive, so I told him that my parents had promised me for 4 years that they would help me out, and at the last minute, it hurt that they had abandoned me for my brother to protect his feelings. If parents had refused to pay for my college education for other reasons, such as financial restrictions, I might not have been as upset. But they actually expected me to abandon my aspirations for the sake of my brother. And they were upset with me because I opted not to. And that is what really hurt me. He was already aware of this, but I hoped that discussing it emotionally would help him understand how devastated I had been. I also informed him that I had always been treated as if I wasn't important, despite the fact that I had always done my best to make my parents proud, which never seemed to be enough. I had a lot of hatred for them, and on the day of the party, I simply decided that I would make sure they understood what they had done was wrong and that I could screw them over. When it came down to it, I was not going to be treated as an idiot after hearing me out. My uncle just said one thing. If I truly believed that I had done the right thing, he had nothing to say to me. I was taken aback because I had assumed that talking to him about my sentiments would help him see that what I had done was motivated by anger, and while it may not have been the correct thing to do, if it made me feel better, He should have simply let me have it. I am not a saint. I can't always do the right thing and allow people to walk all over me. The fact that my parents expected me to accept this silly little bargain and appear to be on their side for money was insulting. So I informed my uncle that he could ignore me if he wanted, but it also meant that I would not accept any financial assistance from him. It was a bold statement for me to make because I had no other strategy in mind and had no idea what would happen if we were unable to resolve the situation. But why don't I say that? My uncle appeared to soften a little and stated that it was unnecessary for me to be angry at him. He was merely unhappy that I opted to seek revenge rather than simply letting it all go. In the past. Then he patiently explained to me that revenge was never the way to advance in life, and I agreed with him. I informed him that I realized what I had done was probably not the correct or even ethical thing to do, but I felt compelled to do it. And now that it was over, I'd never look back again. So we couldn't decide whether I'd done the right thing. But at least we were able to resolve our differences and clear the air, since as I left, we were laughing and making light of the situation. So I think everything is fine now. My folks are still anxiously attempting to contact me, but I've been ignoring them. I honestly don't know what to do about them, so I guess I'll have to keep ignoring them until they learn that attempting to message me repeatedly isn't going to assist their case. Update 2. It's been 10 days since the party, and my parents have only been texting me and getting on my nerves. But this evening, they showed up at my college to pay me another visit. When I informed the receptionist I didn't want to go see them, she said they wouldn't go till I came down and spoke with them, so that compelled me to leave my room and go see them. I was afraid they would disgrace me on campus, so I agreed to accompany them to a nearby diner, where Jared had already joined us. The disturbing issue was that I assumed Jared had not spent the previous year doing anything at home. He had clearly been going to the gym, and he had gained a lot of muscle in just a year because we were virtually the same size. When I left home, he was very jacked now, throwing me nasty glances and flexing his muscles. I'm fairly sure he was just there to scare me, which was both amusing and terrifying because, from the looks of it, he would have beaten me up if given the chance. Fortunately, it did not come to that. My parents were only there to talk to me about what I had done at the party, and they told me that what I had said was completely unnecessary, and they wanted me to make a public post on social media retracting what I had said and admitting that I had made it all up so that their reputation would not be harmed. They told me that the investor had barred them everywhere after the party, and they wanted me to clarify the situation. I made it very obvious that I was not going to do anything like that because even they knew I was telling the truth once again. They tried to buy me out by offering to write me a check for whatever amount I demanded if I did what they asked, but I informed them that money couldn't buy anything, let alone me. When I tried to get up and go after expressing that to them, my father lost his head and literally beat his fist on the table that we were seated at as loudly as possible at the court, claiming that I was not allowed to leave until we sorted this out. That drew a few stares from the other diners, and I know the owner, so I was able to offer him one, and he didn't kick us out since he could see something was going on. Anyway, when my father did that, I started losing my cool too. And I wasn't afraid of Jared because I knew that if he tried to hit me or anything, the owner would be right there and would quickly call the cops. So I decided to confront them and inform my father that he no longer had the authority to tell me what I was and was not permitted to do. When he opted not to support my college tuition, I fled home. I was an adult now, and I did not rely on them for anything, so their regulations no longer apply to me. I made it very plain to them. So my mother attempted to play the, "Oh, we raised you, and this is how you return this card with me." But I quickly cut it off and reminded them that they only performed what was absolutely necessary for me, and that they did not treat me like a king, as they did Jared. They had always been biased toward him, and I was fine with that since they had given me hope that one day they would stand up for me, provide for me, and pay my college tuition. However, they failed to keep their commitment. I had basically raised myself because they only cared about my brother, not me. After that, they had nothing to say, so I told them I was sleeping and that if they ever tried to do something terrible with me again, I would absolutely call the cops. I would even file a restraining order against each of them. Then I left, and now I'm back in my dorm room, planning to phone my uncle and tell him what occurred today. Update 3. Hi. So it's been a month since my previous post here, and after that I got pretty busy with studying and whatnot. I have my finals in a few days. Anyway, after my last meeting with my parents, they agreed not to bother me for a few days. I also discussed what happened with my uncle, and as silly as it sounds, I told him that I was quite confident they had brought Jared along to scare me because that's what it appeared to be. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I didn't want to take any chances, so I informed my uncle that I no longer felt comfortable around them and that I wanted to file a restraining order against them. My uncle informed me that he was perfectly satisfied with the decision and that he would contact a lawyer as soon as possible. I was skeptical about how things would turn out, but coincidentally, the day I decided to file for a restraining order was the same day that Jared showed up at my college, and once again, he demanded that I come down to see him. And this time, when I went down, I made sure to confront him right in the middle of the lobby so that it would be in a public place. And if he tried to do anything, it would be caught on video. He informed me that our parents were very upset because of me, and he wanted me to do what they had asked of me, post an apology on social media. I said no. He said I had to. Otherwise, he would make certain that I suffered the penalties, and I unconsciously told him that I wasn't afraid of a bad guy like him, and that is when it happened. He punched me, and fortunately it was all caught on camera, so that will make obtaining the restraining order much easier. I was also able to avoid it, and instead of striking me in the middle of the face, he caught my cheek. And I won't lie, even though it hurts a lot. It's still a better option than having my nose smashed or something like, because the agony might have been so severe that I couldn't concentrate on studying anyhow. Bottom line, we'll be able to easily obtain a restraining order against my family, which I'm really grateful for. Now I'm simply going to focus on performing well in my tests and getting good grades because I have a lot to prove, and I'm going to do amazing things and show my family where they stand. Thank you to everyone who has supported me in the comments and contacted me. It means a lot to me that so many people have taken the time to read and keep up to date on what's going on. I believe I'll take a break for now and return when I'm rich and successful. Hopefully.